Here in the following is going to be just a little bit more that we can do with enemies. I know some of us are going to use the Pathfinder. The Pathfinder is fine, but there's just some neat little other things that we can do, okay? So one of them that I really like here is the idea of just chasing your character, right? So I want to chase Mush. I mean, right now you can see that he's just kind of hanging out and not much happening. You could obviously blow things up and all that, but no real danger, right? Aside from that scary worm. So what I want to do is add a little something, and what I did is I made another object there, a bird. A bird, a bird, a bird, a bird, a bird. Where is it? It's alphabetical, so bird. So I made this bird. I can make him a little bit bigger if I want there. Not that it matters. But here you go, I got this birdie. And I want to put his origin somewhere, but I didn't even waste time making two animations. I just made the initial kind of instance an animation. And here he is with his wings down, and there's a flap. Okay? So nothing more than a sprite that I turned into an animation. We've done this before. Okay? So what I want to do is make him move. I want to make him move automatically without using anything up here in the event sheet. And I'm going to do that, which we all know, by adding a behavior. When I go to add new behavior, there's tons on here, right? So you got the attributes, there's general, there's things that we're going to use here later. But then here in movements, a lot of this we can do and we should be doing, but bullet is the one that is just automatic. We notice that when we're shooting, we just hit the space bar or some sort of button and it automatically starts moving across. So that's what I want to do. I want to click bullet. But the thing is, I don't want it to just be a bullet, right? So if I preview this now, well, there he goes. He's out of here. So that wasn't very helpful. Again, I want him to chase Mush. And I also want to chase him not so fast, right? So 155, I'm going to change the speed here. Do you see that in my properties? And I will add a little bit of gravity just for funsies and call it that. So what I need to do is just something in the events here. And have I done it yet? No, I have not, okay? And what I want to do is I want to use that every tick, right? So if I go to add event, it's going to be a system thing. And you'll see why here in a second. But basically, it's system because I want it to happen automatic, either timed or, again, this every tick, as they say. So when I do that, I think it's highlighted. Yeah, so every tick. And what I want it to do is not so much move somewhere, right? I just want to, what they're referring to is set an angle. So I'm going to go ahead and click on my birdie here, well. And with that bird, now I'm going to go through, you're probably, if you're going through the organization of this, you see things that make more sense, right? Like size and position. You think position would be one, especially since we're moving him. I think bullet here, you would think it would be something along the lines of that particular behavior that we had. But what I really want it to be is set angle toward position, right? So we've automatically added movement to it. Now we're just going to change the angle, right? So when I say set angle towards position, I can add any XY coordinate I want. So if I were to just put like 100 here, so 100 X and then 200 Y. That, oh, excuse me. So that bullet, when I go to hit play, is going to just simply go towards the angle of 100 X, 200 Y. But that doesn't help with Mush being chased. And since I do want to chase Mush, all I have to do here is remember what I called him, which is Mush. Type in Mush, right? We've done this before, dot X. So that's what I want to do is Mush's X. And then Mush dot Y. So there you have it. I mean, it's really that simple. All I'm saying is use the bullet, make it automatically move, but then always go to the X and Y coordinate that is Mush. Okay? So I'm going to hit done, and then you can see it's right here. It says system on every tick. Our little bird should set its angle towards the X and Y position of Mush. And his X and Y position we know is going to change because, whoa, because I'm moving him, right? I mean, you could imagine if you had several instances of this, how that would go. So that's that. I mean, that's just a pretty neat thing. Again, you could put several on there. I mean, imagine how many birds we could some Alfred Hitchcock stuff, right? If we wanted, but we're not going to do that. So there's the birdie. And next up is something a little bit more advanced, but I really like it because it uses variables. And I heart variables. I think variables are very important to understand and to learn. So we'll establish that, but first and foremost, it's kind of getting things set up. And what I want to do is get my scene up. And this scene is set because I have this bush here, and I have this bush here. If you double click on it, you can see that I have my bush set up, my collision points here, where he's actually going to kind of sneak into the bush a little bit before he goes back, just to kind of give it a little bit more realistic look and feel. And then, of course, on him, we went over this in class, but I want to make sure that the collision point then on the worm is just what it needs to be, right? So I could, if I wanted, make it the whole entire worm or bound it to the box as it comes default. But that would mean if he were to go in this direction, so I'm going to close this, you see his little tail here, right? So if he's going in this direction and I set him to flip around, his tail, even though he flips, is still going to be kind of, what do they call that? Colliding with this bush, so it's going to be moot. It's just going to make him like, be all crazy here. So we have to be mindful of these things. First off, I want to add some behaviors to our little bugger here. And the first one that I want it to be is platform. And I want him to be platform because I want to be able to have him walk on this here at the bottom. So I got to find my platform. There you go. So I have my platform behavior. And now, you know what, I'm going to wait, but we're good. Now I have my platform there. He is going to be moving here. But I also, if I were to do that, so I'm going to preview this now. I have him on platform, but look at this. Now when I move mush, that weird little worm jumps with me, which is, I don't know, kind of neat, but I don't want it to be neat. So what you have to do when you add a platform that you want to later control through your events is you come over here to the default controls and you just uncheck that. And then the moment that you uncheck that, he's just going to sit there chilling and off we go. And then another thing just to show you is I do have, in this one it made sense, I'm just reusing a sprite. I have the stop animation and then the crawl animation. Well, I didn't want to waste any events, so you know that you can have this your sprite selected, and then you come down way at the bottom, it says animations, etc. There's this initial initial animation, and you set that to crawl. So, well, in my sense it would be crawl, but you set it to the animation that you want to see. That way you don't have to worry and waste any events, okay? The other thing that we have to do is, this is where it's going to be variable controlled. So I want to add an instance variable. And I want to just, well, apparently I'm going to call it this. I want to call it patrol. I'm calling it patrol because we're just assuming this little bugger is just patrolling this little area here, okay? And I could use a Boolean, right, where I turn it off and on, but this isn't going to be an off and on instance. This is going to be directional, as you'll see. So I want to have a clear 1 or a clear 0. So I'm going to keep it at number, and then initial value is 0. So we're good to go there, okay? So now, anytime that I want to reference something that's happening with my worm, I can use this this patrol variable as an option. So now we're all set up for the most part. So I'm going to come over here to my event sheet, and I'm just going to establish some things that I want to happen based on the variable, okay? So first and foremost, I'm going to go ahead and get my worm. And what I want to do is look for the compare instance variable, okay? And by comparing the instance variable, I can establish the fact that right now, anything that I say is going to be when the patrol variable is equal to 0, okay? So anytime that it's equal to 0, I can add an action for something to happen. And in this instance, what I want to happen is I want my worm again, so I'm going to go down here to worm AI. And what I want to do is I want to simulate control. So simulate control, is, as you could probably imagine, is how we're going to make him move automatically without any control of the arrow key and anything like that. So I'm going to click simulate control. And because his initial instance is he's facing left, I'm going to go ahead and say that I want him to go left, which is the default. As you can see, it's on the top. So that's fine. every time that that patrol instance variable is 0, we're going to have him off and running. Now we also know when we did this platform control before that we have to set a mirror or not mirrored, right? So I have to go back to my AI guy, and I want to set mirrored. I want to set it to not mirrored since in fact he's starting, well no, because it's the starting position, so I don't want it to be mirrored. Does that make sense? So we're good. So now, as we have done in the past, especially with that platform control, we know that if everything is 0 is going to the left and not mirrored, all we have to do is copy this, right? And change everything to mimic 1. So if it's 1, I don't want it to be pressing left. I want it to be simulating pressing right. And I don't want it to be not mirrored. I want it to be mirrored. So there we go. Right now, as you can see, it's set up that if it's 0, which is it is by default, that the worm is going to be simulating walking to his left. So let's see if that works. And there he goes. That wasn't too crazy, right? So what we need to do now is create some sort of scenario where that variable changes from 0 to 1 and then subsequently back to 0 once it's 1, okay? And that is where kind of setting up this stage that we did in this little patrol area, as I'm calling it, he's basically going to walk back and forth, and what he's going to do is he's going to end up colliding with these bushes. And that's why it was important to make sure that we're messing around with that collision point there. So what we're going to say is when he collides with this bush, change it to 1. When he collides with this bush, change it back to 0, okay? And that is just the sequence of mine because of the how I have him facing in this particular direction, okay? So let's get after that here. So my event is going to say, when my wormy, where is he? Wormy AI. When he collides with another object, and of course I'm going to pick the bush, right? So we know it's going to, when he collides with the bush, I want things to happen, okay? I'm just going to hit done right now. And what I want to happen is going to be a sub-event. So when this happens, I want 2 other things to happen. So that way I can come over here and I can add sub-event. And the first one is pretty straightforward, right? So we know it's 0. When he makes his first collision, we're going to do what? Change it to 1. So we're going to say worm AI. When he collides, I want to compare instance variable, and I want to change it to 1. Oh, no I don't. I want to say if it's 0. My action is that I'm going to change it to 1, right? Did I pass it? Did I pass it? Did I pass it? Did I pass it? Instance variable. Okay, set value to 1. Okay? So here it is. When it collides with a bush and its worm instance variable is 0, my action is to change it to 1. Right? And then quite simply, the moment that it changes to 1, what do you think it's going to do? It's going to come up and instantiate this particular instance, which will mirror the little bugger, and then simulate pressing right. So now we have this established. It's our first thing. We're establishing that if it's 0, change it to 1. So now I'm going to add another sub-event. And in this time, instead of saying all the other things, I'm just going to quite simply say else, right? So those of us who have coded before and all that stuff, there's things called conditional statements. If it's this, then do that. If it's that, else do this, right? So basically else means if it's not 0, it would be 1, so do the opposite. And here we go. I'm just going to go ahead and say wormy AI and set variable, instance variable, where's my set value to 0. See that? And it's really all we're doing is, if you could see the pattern here, is we've started this. The 0 is going to the left. 1 is going to the right. So we're just doing the opposite. And then the same instance down here. If it's 0, set it to 1. Else, set it to 0. Okay? So let's see if that works. There he goes. There he goes. Oh my goodness. He's going a little fast though, isn't he? That's almost intimidating. So I'm going to go ahead and slow him down first and foremost. What's his name? Worm AI. Oh, yeah. I'm going to get him about a 175. And that should be good. But now, the whole basis of what we're doing here is, they call it AI because it's going to react, right? So right now, if I play this again, you're going to see that Mush comes down here, and off he goes. You know, there's no real threat. I'm not being chased or anything. I just have to kind of dodge this worm, right? Hey, whoa. So that's that. What I want to do is have this worm literally chase Mush, right? And you do that by using the line of sight behavior. So I'm going to say add new behavior and click line of sight. Now what this line of sight is literally saying that there's some sort of line of sight, that this worm is going to visualize and see in any which way direction. And you can come over here to this, I'm going to close this here. You can see that the line of sight properties is not that bad. So the obstacles, meaning solids. So if I were to be on the other side of this bush and it was really tall, the worm couldn't see me because I'm being obstructed, right? The range, now that's the distance. This is set to 10,000. I don't know if that's pixels or what have you, but we can just assume the larger the number, the farther the range, right? I don't have much spice going on here, so I'm going to keep it as is. Now the cone of view, that's different, right? So the cone of view, and I'll go ahead and click on here. The cone of view is this idea right here. So the angle is he's 360 right now. So if I'm on top of him, if I'm on the left of him, or the right of him, or even underneath him, he's going to see you. Now you could do 180, which is just kind of this way and that way. You can do 45, 65. So just think about what you want to do. In this particular scenario, I want it to be 360, just so wherever Mush is, he can see him and then start chasing, right? So that's that. Now, we'll just go back to our event sheet, and I'm going to add another event. And I'm going to go ahead and say, where's my wormy, where's my wormy? When the wormy, now you're going to see something different here. So this worm, we went through this several times. Now all of a sudden there's this line of sight. And that's what adding a behavior does. It'll add kind of some of these instances within your conditions and actions that you can use. So I'm going to say, if he has a line of sight to the object, okay? When I pick that, of course, the next step is, well, which object? And the object is going to be, what's his name? Mush Racer, right? Mush Racer. The object is going to be Mush Racer. And I'm just going to hit done because that's all that I have to do. But basically, you're saying when the worm has a line of sight of Mush, when he sees Mush, now I want to do something. Okay? And what I'm going to do is use the x coordinates. Just like we did earlier with the x and y of Mush and all that stuff. I'm going to do the same thing again, except I just want to explain quickly. You see the only access, especially if we have a platform and this worm is just going back and forth, the only real access that we can work with is the x, right? So what I want to do, and again, so we're using this access to kind of determine where in relation Mush is to the worm, and then that determines his position and direction, okay? So I'm going to add another sub-event. And this sub-event works very similar to how we did things before, right? So I want something to happen, which initially is the line of sight, and then other things underneath that will be correlated to that line of sight. So I'm going to say Mush Racer. And I'm just going to say, I'm just going to put an X because I want to compare X. I want to compare the X position. Okay? And what I want it to be initially is if my X is less, so if the X of the worm is less than worm, what do I do? Underscore, there it is, dot X. I'm going to say done. And then I'm just going to add another one while I'm here so we can talk it out. Add another sub-event. Let me move this over. So if my first initial X instance is looking for a less than, you could probably assume that my next particular X instance is going to be greater than, right? Hey, where's Mush Racer? Mush Racer. Oh, there it is. So again, I'm going to compare x. I'm going to do this. I'm going to say compare x and is greater than worm underscore, there we go, dot x. Done. So now I have two things happening. I'm establishing the fact that there is a line of sight. So I'm establishing that this worm sees mush. And then I'm going to say if mush, if his x position is less than the worm, which means he's on his left, I want him to go to the left, right? I do that by simply saying worm, where's my instance variable? Set value to 0, right? Because the moment that I set that to 0, all of this stuff happens up here. See that? And then, of course, if the x of the worm, if the x of mush is greater than the x of the worm, I want him to go to the right. So my action is going to be worm.ai, set value 1, which basically means go to the right, right? Because if you come up here and you can see that 1 means right, 0 means left. So let's go ahead and preview that. There he is. He doesn't see me. He doesn't see me at all. So I'm going to jump. Now he's got me. He's got me in his sights. No! And there you have it. I mean, I could do some sort of collision or something like that, but for now, it's just a matter of just getting him to follow and see what's going on. So that's that. Line of sight, enemy AI.